Hello everyone, Sage here, welcoming you all to the Executive Corner at Kalkine TV Studios. Expert Talks with 20 minutes roundup today sees Mr. Gavin Loyden in the hot seat. He's the MD of QEM Ltd, so we're very lucky to have him here today. And we bring you industry leaders, successful business owners, market and equity advocates, all under one roof to help you discover the insights of the stock market and help you understand how you can create multiple passive income streams. So in today's show, as I said, we've got Mr. Gavin Loyden here, the MD of QEM Ltd, who's going to share some of his insights. Welcome, Gavin. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Thanks very much, Sage. And yeah, pleasure to be involved today. And thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, we really appreciate your time. So let's not waste any more of it and get on with the questions. The vanadium market in the recent years has been tightly balanced, with the demand set to outgrow supply in 2021. How do you see the vanadium market shaping up in the upcoming years, please?
I think everything's got to be seen through the lens of, the global pandemic at this point in time, Sage, to be perfectly honest. But we see the market in very positive terms going forward, both in 2021 and beyond. Vanadium is very much tied to the steel industry, and 90% of vanadium goes into steel manufacture or steel production. It's basically a strengthening agent for steel. So a loose rule of thumb is a half a kilo of vanadium doubles the strength of a ton of steel. Now, that's significant, particularly when it relates to China being the largest producer and consumer of vanadium, and most of that going into the steel industry. Now, as you're probably well aware, China was the first to pull out of the pandemic in industrial terms, and they've created quite a large stimulus package for infrastructure in response to COVID. The rest of the world obviously lagging a little bit in those terms, but we see that it won't be a sharp reaction, but it'll be a slow reaction as everyone gets a vaccine into their arms and people start to get back to work. Again, why that's significant in China and the stimulus packages had such a marked impact on the vanadium market. That stimulus packages created a situation where China produced over 1 billion tons of steel last year for the first time. When everyone else was sort of locked in their homes, China bounced back rather sharply and continued on with its industrial program. So, as I say, that's been a huge response, really, given the current circumstances. But obviously, as the rest of the world starts to play catch up now over the next year or two, or however long that may take, we'll see further stresses on that market. Now, supply is very tight at the moment. There's actually about a 5,000 ton deficit, according to Vanitec's latest figures. And that's just related to steel. That's it without talking about the energy storage market in any real terms.
Thank you for sharing those insights. So how do you see the transition to renewable energy to work out in favour of vanadium redox flow batteries, or VFRBs? Also, could you throw some light on how the VFRB stacks up against the lithium-ion batteries, please?
Vanadium's quickly becoming the chemistry of choice, I think, for large-scale grid support batteries, not so much for your laptop computer or your telephone. That's always a place for lithium-ion. But the real benefits for vanadium is the infinite scalability, really. You're only restricted by the size of the tanks of vanadium electrolyte that you're using. So you'll see in China again, and it's not just a pure China story. I keep relating to China, but I'll expand on that in a moment. But the largest project in the world at the moment is in Dalian in China, and that's a 200 megawatt, 800 megawatt hour project. And to give you some idea, that really contains about 9,000 tons of vanadium pentoxide electrolyte. So to put that in context, the whole world produced 108,000 tons of vanadium last year. So we're talking about a significant impact on supply. The area around Dalian now in the peninsula there, they're building another 4 of these.
Wow.
So that'll give you some idea of how it impacts on just taking it back to that supply and demand situation. But to answer your question on why redox flow batteries as opposed to other chemistries is really the safety because they are literally two tanks of liquid electrolyte, so they can't catch on fire, unlike some other chemistries. And more importantly, they go for pretty much infinitum. So they're endlessly recyclable, really, in the sense that, you know, the cyclability, I should say, not recyclability, the cyclability. Yeah. So you can have tens of thousands of cycles, and the battery can discharge and recharge at 100%, and it can actually do that at the same time, which is very unique in energy storage terms. When we talk about recyclability, you can recycle the vanadium 100%. So if for some reason you were finished with the battery, you can use that vanadium and go back into the steel industry or the chemical industry or the smart glass industry. It's such an interesting metal that it's got such versatility that it can really move across a number of sectors. So it's great for that, and it has a very low environmental footprint. Particularly when you're talking about the actual production of vanadium as opposed to, say, lithium and bromides and other chemistries. It's got a very limited carbon footprint. And now with scale and with the rollouts, there's over 120 worldwide at the moment, including a one being built in South Australia at the moment, which is a $20 million project. Again, that's I think that's a 8 megawatt hour project, just checking my notes. Again, to give you some relativity to that, it's about 9.8 tons of vanadium pentoxide electrolyte per megawatt hour, so of storage. So that gives you an idea of the impact that it will have on the marketplace.
Right.
Yeah. Hopefully that answered those questions for you.
It certainly did. I was just thinking about the longevity of these projects. It's going to take quite a few years to get that all done.
Yeah, yes. Well, the thing is that these things do last forever. So you don't have to, well, when I say forever, a hell of a long time. So you don't really have to replace them every 7 years as you may do with some other technologies.
Excellent. And the focus on the environmentally friendly solutions, that's definitely a positive focus point.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And even as it relates back, there's been some recent studies done that relate back to the carbon output in actually creating one of these batteries as opposed to some other batteries, and it's about half. And now, because of the cost imperative as well, it's becoming more and more economically viable. With prices down to about $100 a kilowatt hour.
Okay, thank you very much. So question 3, the Julia Creek project is located in the prolific Northwest Minerals Province, or NWMP, of Queensland. How does the premium location favour this project?
Well, we've been lucky enough, we are well located. We've got the Northern Rail and the Flinders Highway run right through the top of our tenement area. So that gives us instant access to infrastructure and all the available requirements there for a project to get up. But as you mentioned, we're inside the Northwest Minerals Province. That gives us, allows the government to fund a lot of infrastructure in the area, particularly power. You might notice that the Copper String 2 project is now up and running, or is about to begin. And that's going to reduce power costs to that region by about 50%. And that's obviously an imperative for most projects. Power is being one of the largest consumers of the project's capital. So you need good access to cheap power. It also allows for the government to provide further assistance to develop projects at a more rapid pace. And similarly, we sit inside the newly designated Eastern Resource Corridor. Similarly, from a federal point of view, that's designed to accelerate projects of this sort of dimension and get these things up running. Because what we're looking to produce is not only the metals for the new economy, being vanadium, which is on the critical minerals list, but also transport fuels, which will be critical in Australia, and particularly in that northwest region, to help open up that region.
Excellent. Well, exciting dual commodity project from the sounds of things. Great. Well, how is QEM placed on the processing and the beneficiation of fronts to produce a commercially viable vanadium and oil products?
Yeah, well, in the last 12 months, we've been doing extensive bench test work in the laboratories here in Australia. We've had some pretty interesting results. We're using we've looked at all of the different types of oil extraction methodologies, and with the vanadium, we've been able to extract that post hydrocarbon extraction and get about a 90% yield using acid. There's a bit of a consumption rate there, so we're doing some optimization work on that to see if we can't reduce the consumption rate for the reagents. We're also looking at beneficiating the residual ash, is what we'll call it, from after the oil's been extracted. And just recently, we've got onto a company called GSA Environmental in the UK. They've got a new proprietary technology that we're investigating as well. So we've recently sent some samples over there, and we've just begun a program with them to have a look at their scenario. Mm-hmm. We've looked at alkaline leaching as well, and we think there's a way forward there, and we're doing further optimization work there.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us. So Next question on the list is, how is QEM placed among other mineral exploration and development companies to create shareholder value?
Well, always an important question, that's for sure. Yes. Well, we've got such a unique resource, as we mentioned before, well located, giving us a couple of commodities, possibly a third. We're looking at the end of all this might be a cement product there as well. We'll get onto a little bit more of that detail as we progress those studies. Mm-hmm. But I think the dual commodity play sort of gives us a bit of a hedge for investors against the two scenarios. But I think it's important to mention that these commodities are now more than just discretionary items, if you like. They're critical to Australia's future growth. I'm not sure that many people are aware of the lack of fuel supply in Australia at the moment. We're importing pretty much all of the diesel and all of the jet fuel. We don't have the refining capacity left in Australia to deal with the condensates produced from the gas industry, which is our main oil supply at the moment. So even that has to go offshore to be refined and come back as product. So our intent is to create a bit more resilience in the country. And I think COVID has sort of shown that we have a lack of resilience in that space and a number of other spaces, to be perfectly honest. And vanadium itself is on the critical minerals list. So it's been designated by the US, the Australian, and now the European governments as to be a vital commodity that has to be developed and has to be brought to the fore quickly, because there's not a great deal coming out of China. China's now a net importer, whereas it always was an exporter of vanadium in the past. So there is no domestic supply in Australia. There's none in the US. There's only 3 suppliers outside of China and Russia at the moment, and that is 2 in South Africa and 1 in Brazil. Most of their offtake, in fact, nearly all of their offtake, I believe, at the moment is going to China. So there's a real requirement, and militarily, you can't build any weapons without vanadium. This is why this critical minerals list has come to fruition under the Trump government. He realised quite quickly that, you know, if trade tensions are rising and you're having supply lines slowed down or cut off, and this is outside of any COVID, you're going to run into issues, particularly if you need to develop, you know, your military and jets and aerospace. I mean, aerospace is a big user of vanadium. Everything from the turbines in the jets to the door hinges is made from a vanadium, aluminium, titanium alloy. Interestingly enough, they're printed in a 3D. The jet turbines now are printed in a 3D printer because vanadium, aluminium, titanium can all be powdered. And they provide exceptional strength, and they're using them in 3D printers now. So the aerospace is a big uptake of vanadium, and that's growing as well. So all of these factors come in, and this is why it's been designated a critical mineral, a strategic mineral, because you really have to have it. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for us to move forward.
Of course. Thank you so much for sharing that information. And you mentioned the amount of oil product that Australia actually imports. It's close to 93% of the crude oil.
That's correct.
So a very, very high statistic there. And with so many countries announcing decreases to the barrels of oil per day that they're going to be, pumping out of the ground. Yes, it definitely puts your company in the spotlight, that's for sure.
It does, and we're only looking to do that on a domestic front. We don't see ourselves as being an exporter of that. We just want to build some resilience into the Australian economy.
Exactly. So on to the next question. Would you like to touch upon the company's short to mid-term plans and how well these are aligned with the long-term vision of the company, please?
Sure. So, as I mentioned just briefly, we've been ensconced in a testing regime at the bench level. We are coming to the conclusions there. We've got a little bit more work to do on the vanadium side. We understand the oil side and that extraction technology fairly well. We're getting some internal costing work done on that to see how that stacks up. And we're hoping this will lead us then to the beginning of a pre-feasibility study, maybe in the second half of this year. That'll be the first stage. That'll lend itself then to some piloting work, should everything stack up, and we believe it will. And then obviously we'll move on as quickly as we can to production. And there's a great deal of support for the supportive government environment at the moment that's going to help push these things along.
We've reached the end of this wonderful interview with a final question for Gavin. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with our esteemed audience here at Kalkine?
Yeah, well, I think your listeners would agree, Sage, that we've got a pretty interesting project here. It's certainly of scale. We're one of the largest single resources in the world. We're at a very shallow depth. We've got some technology behind us now that we believe will be able to bring all this to fruition. And I think at today's price in the market, I think we look pretty good for value. So hopefully your investors will see that in the same light. And there's further information obviously available on our website. And of course, I'm available to have a chat to anyone if they wish.
That's fantastic news. Thank you, Gavin. So definitely a lot of food for thought there for you viewers. And thank you so much, Gavin, for your valuable time. I really do appreciate it. That was a fabulous show. And it was lovely chatting to you, Gavin. We thank you for your time again. And
thanks very much.
It's Sage and Gavin signing off for today.
Thanks very much. We'll see you next time.
Yes, until then, stay apprised and invest wise with Kalkine.